What stood out to me is how quickly people moved from confusion to fear, labeling Forrest as creepy without pausing to consider context, and this rapid escalation highlights how modern audiences often default to suspicion when they sense even the slightest break from expected social patterns. From my perspective, many comments expressing fear seemed rooted less in what Forrest did and more in how unfamiliar the dynamic felt, which suggests that people sometimes transform discomfort into warnings, projecting danger onto individuals who are simply socially inexperienced rather than threatening. It became clear that some viewers reacted not to Forrest himself, but to their assumptions about how protective mothers may behave, creating a narrative in which an overly involved parent is automatically seen as a red flag, though the reality is usually far more complicated than that. I noticed that a few comments went as far as urging others to run, and this reveals something interesting about group psychology. When a crowd shares anxiety about a moment, the fear becomes amplified, even when the behavior does not indicate actual risk, which shows how storytelling influences perception more than facts. What fascinates me is how people framed the situation as potentially dangerous for future partners, imagining scenarios that have never happened. And this tendency speaks to how deeply reality TV shapes worries about relationships, turning small moments into predictions of long-term instability. Several viewers spoke about keeping kids inside, which in my view reflects an exaggerated emotional response driven by the intensity of the scene rather than a realistic assessment of character, illustrating how easily audiences can project worst-case outcomes onto individuals who do not fit standard molds. The idea that the interaction belonged in a true crime show rather than a dating program shows how television aesthetics prime the viewer's mind to categorize situations emotionally, reshaping benign moments into symbolic threats based purely on tone, editing, and narrative framing. I think a lot of this fear comes from the fact that we rarely see relationships where vulnerability and parental support coexist so visibly, and this unfamiliar combination triggers protective instincts in viewers who imagine how they would feel in the partner's place. For me, the discussion should not focus on labeling Forrest as frightening, but on understanding how limited information can distort judgment when the audience fills gaps with their own anxieties rather than with empathy or curiosity about why someone behaves the way they do. This whole conversation reveals more about the viewer's fears than about Forrest himself. And I encourage you to reflect on whether your reaction came from the moment on screen or from deeper assumptions about safety, boundaries, and unconventional family dynamics.